when we talk about King's Indian and when we discuss this opening, so we know we have to talk and discuss King's Indian from two different sides. I would recommend to play King's Indian for black, and if you are a d4 player, I would recommend one particular line to for white. If you are white and somebody plays against you King's Indian, I would recommend one particular line to play against the King's Indian. So let's start discussing King's Indian defense for black. d4, knight f6. The disadvantage, if you can call it a disadvantage, when you play King's Indian for black, the disadvantage is, in a way, is that white chooses the variation. There are a lot of variations in King's Indian. There are such as Averbach variation or Zemisch or Fianchetto variation or classical, or they're all different kinds, and each of these variations has a lot of different deviations. So d4, knight f6, c4, g6, knight c3, bishop g7. We are in King's Indian now, if it's white's move. So let's start with the most popular system for white, which is called classical system. e4, d6, knight f3, castle, and bishop e2. So we have classical position of the King's Indian. There are, in the classical variation, what I would recommend for you to play for black is the knight a6 variation. This is my personal recommendation. Does not necessarily have to be the main variation. Of course, you can play e5. That is the main move. And after castling, play knight c6, which is going to take you to the very well explored variation after d5, knight e7. And you have to learn a lot of theory. There is also variation with knight d7 and e5. There are many of them. They are probably equally good. It's a matter of taste. And that's where I cannot say, oh, this is better continuation than the other. They are all stand on the same level. Well, if I had to pick one, I would recommend one that I stand behind of. So that was something that I am using myself. Knight a6. After, in this position, knight a6, black plays, white castles, and black goes e5. And here, white has several continuations. Well, I would say maybe 3 continuations. d5, bishop e3, and the rook to e1. Well, let's look at them. First move that we should analyze is d5, when white closes the center. I think this may be the most pleasant continuation to face for black. Black goes knight c5, attacking immediately e4 pawn, and white has 2 ways to play. Either queen c2 to protect e4 pawn, or knight d2 with the same idea. Let's see what happens now. On queen c2, what we should play, we should secure our knight on c5 by playing a5, and after bishop a3, probably b6 to secure the knight again, and then we want to go knight g4 followed by f5. This is the main continuation, main plan for black, and there's not much theory in here. in case white goes knight d2, then a move I like very much that gives black a good position is bishop h6. Now black is threatening bishop takes d2, and knight takes e4. So white has to protect the central pawn once more. And after white plays queen c2, then we're going to go a5. And now you see this is typical King's Indian bishop on g7. That is, with the closed center, is not the best piece on the board. It's not as good as white's dark square bishops. We will exchange it, because sooner or later the knight from d2 has to move, and then we'll play bishop takes c1, rook takes c1, and maybe even b6, having reasonably good position. And later on, you may move the knight from f6 by playing knight e8, and maybe even playing f5. So you have good position here. So this is the complete coverage of d5 continuations, but there are two others. So as we said, the main move is bishop e3, but let's look also at the rook e1 move. Now, after rook e1, the move I would recommend here is that not typical at all for a King's Indian defense. In fact, you rarely see it in King's Indian that black would play bishop g4. This is highly unusual. Okay, this is the move I would recommend here. Now, bishop g4 normally is played. Typical idea would be to put pressure on the d4 square. So how you put pressure, if you want to play maybe bishop takes f3, and then e takes d. So white has here choice between d takes e or d5. And here's what may happen. Well, here is what may happen here. After d takes e, we have to play bishop takes f3. Now, if white plays bishop takes f3, then black is going to play d takes e, and black has good position because d4 square is weak. And if d4 square is weak, black is going to have good position. Well, they may play knight to c5, knight e6, getting to d4, or maybe knight d7, knight c5, knight e6. So white is doing okay. On the other hand, if white plays e takes f, then black plays bishop takes e2. Now white must play queen takes e2, and black plays queen takes f6. I think this position is slightly better for black, because on moves like knight d5, we can go queen to e6, and remember, this is like a common rule in openings. If you have slight space disadvantage, you should exchange some minor pieces. You accomplish that, you exchange two sets of minor pieces. And here we have black has no problem playing rook e8, maybe even f5 later. Knight from d5 will be kicked by c6, and knight from a6 is going to go to c5. Black has very fine position here. So after bishop g4 is not recommended for white to play d takes e. And if white plays a move like bishop e3, then what I would do, I would play bishop takes f3, bishop takes f3, e takes d, bishop takes d4, and now knight to b4. So what we want to do, we may want to play knight to c6, kick the bishop, white's light square bishop from a long diagonal, and after bishop e3, play rook e8, and black is doing okay. However, after knight b4, you should remember that white, after knight b4, white has e5 move. And if we play d takes e, then they may go even bishop to c5. All that does nothing for white because black can play knight d3, and on bishop takes f8, play knight takes e1. It's easy to see that black is absolutely okay. So this is kind of pilot variation for this continuation. So, and finally, the last move in this position after bishop g4 within cover is d5. Oh, then we play knight c5, attacking the e4 pawn. And notice, on queen c2, we go a5, securing knight on c5, and move like knight d2. See, knight d2 looks like very good move. What white wants to do, they don't want to exchange dark square bishops. They want to exchange light square bishops because black's light square bishop is better than white's light square bishop. So here comes the tactical shot, knight to d3. This is very important move. And now, if white plays bishop takes g4, then black plays knight takes g4. And black is doing very well. Black is doing real well here because, well, at this point, white may even be in trouble. Maybe white should play rook f1. I don't know if we have queen h4. We probably don't. But we have simple continuation. Knight takes c1. And after knight takes c1 and rook takes c1, black can simply go knight f6, and they are doing absolutely fine. Black's next move will be bishop h6. And here black accomplished everything. They have very strong, uncontested bishop on h6 that controls the good diagonal. They have possibility of knight h5 and maybe knight g7 and f5 later. So white has not that much of a counterplay here. So black is doing absolutely fine. So let's go back now where white had three choices. And three choices were, as I already mentioned, there were rook e1, which we already covered, d5 we covered as well, and now we are at bishop e3. This is the main move of this continuation, of this variation. Here, knight g4, this is all modern theory. Bishop to g5, queen e8 is the best move, and now white may play d takes e. Those are all the best continuations for white. D takes e, h3, black goes h6. Now, white's best move, actually it doesn't matter, not the best, bishop d2 and bishop c1, they are absolutely identical because when black's knight go to f6, bishop e3 is the best move. So whether bishop went to d2 or c1 didn't matter. Only other thing white can do in this position is to play h takes g, and white wins a pawn here. White wins a pawn, but it's not a good idea for them to do that. H takes g, knight takes g5, queen to e7. We're attacking the knight on g5. Knight has to retreat to h3, and black has a clear advantage in this position. And here is why. first thing black should do here is to restrict white's knight on c3 by playing maybe c6. That knight cannot come to d5. Later, black is going to play maybe rook d8, but definitely knight c5 later, knight e6, and you see the clear weakness on dark squares for white. White has very weak dark squares in the center. Black has a clear advantage here. There were a couple of games I saw black won them both on relatively high level. But we can't now go to all the details how to explore these dark squares and what is the best strategical plan. You know you have to play on dark squares. This is more like a middle game and the strategy question than the opening. Assessment, black has an advantage, and this is not a good way for white to play. So based on this variation, so we can say that black's bishop has to go to d2 and c1. As we said, it doesn't make any difference. Knight to f6, and now bishop e3. And here, what I think is the best move for black is queen to e7. This move was played by Grandmaster Kramnik, first played by Grandmaster Kramnik against Dutch Grandmaster Piquet. And after knight d5, that's what happened in the game, queen d8, I analyzed this position. There were several different games played by white. White had, in some of them, had little advantage. Some of them black equalized easily and maybe even got an advantage on their own. You see, what's the idea of playing queen e7 and after knight d5 playing queen d8? Now white's e4 pawn is hanging. And white does not have clearly good way of protecting it. Maybe white should play knight takes f6, followed by queen takes f6. And in my opinion, this position is very much acceptable for black. Piquet played c5 and Kramnik played knight b8. It's okay to go in this position, knight b8, because position is closed and knight, you see, white does not have knight on c3, which could have gone to d5 and attack black's queen side. Black's next projected move is knight to c6, heading to d4. And black will have okay position. I would recommend to play this way against the classical variation. I do it myself, and I have relatively good results. And I think you should work in that area. You should explore more and make sure you like it. And if you have any questions, probably you should get some help of the experts, and or you can write to me or contact me, and I will be happy to cooperate in that. So this will cover our classical variations. So let's move on to the other variations. There is no particular order we should look at them. So if we just looked at the variation with the classical variation, let's go now and look at Averbach variation. e4, d6, bishop e2, castle, and bishop to g5. Now, Averbach variation was very popular a couple of decades ago, about 20, 25 years ago. But even now, a number of players, they play it very successfully with white. Now, it's known that black should go for c5. The reason I would go for c5 is by playing h6 first. After h6, white must retreat the bishop, and two possible retreats are bishop to f4 and bishop to e3. Bishop to e3 is most expected and the best continuation. On bishop to f4, black can simply play knight c6, threatening e5, and on d5, if white goes d5, you may still can go e5. And you have good position, because on bishop to e3, what I would do, I would sacrifice the pawn without any hesitation by playing bishop d4, knight d4, bishop takes d4, e takes d, queen takes d4. Black has very strong dark square bishop, and after rook e8 there is a threat of knight takes e4. Black has very good position. On queen d3 we may go c6 followed by queen b6. I like black's position, but again, you don't have to do that. You don't have to play in this position knight d4. You may simply go knight e7, hoping to retreat the knight next move and go for f5. Black is okay. So let's go back to the main move, which is bishop e3, and here we go e5, c5. So let's see what can white do here. There are two moves, d takes c, and there is move d5. After d takes c, I don't think black has any problems. The move to play here is queen a5. Obviously, white does not want to play cd, because after knight takes e4, they're going to have big problems to deal with. So the best move in this position is bishop d2, queen takes c5, knight f3, bishop g4, bishop e3, queen a5. And after white castles, black may simply play bishop takes f3, bishop takes f3, and knight b to d7. Black has no problems. They're going to play rook fc8, maybe rook ab8, and go for b5. They exchanged it one set of minor pieces, so they don't experience big space disadvantage, so they have a reasonably good game. So going back now to the point where we played c5, there are a couple of other moves here. There is move e5, and there is move d5. d5 is the main move, of course. After e5, you can simply play even knight g4, and white's center is going to collapse. So the main move in this position is obviously d5. And that's when we play e6. Actually, knight is on g1. After, when we played here c5, and if white plays e5, we can go even knight d7. That's what I wanted to say. E d takes d, e takes d, knight f3, knight c6. White has no advantage. So white's main move is d5. We go e6. And let me tell you, main idea of Averbach variation for white is, after exchange of the central pawns, which is going to happen on the next move, to put bishop on d3, knight on f3, and pawn on h3. So white has to do it in exact order. So they are not going to play bishop d3 now, because after ed, knight g4. They are not going to play knight f3 because of the same knight g4. So what they should do, they should start with the h3 move. Now we play e takes d, e takes d. And now we should go rook to e8. White's main move here is bishop to d3. They have to do it. Now, if white goes knight f3, then black has absolutely good position by bishop f5, castle, and knight e4. That's what white tries to stop by playing bishop d3, knight f3 and castle. Then they will control most of the squares in the center. So they play bishop d3, and they can play bishop d3 in two different move orders. They can play it right away, or they can play queen d2 first. And after we play king h7, which we should, then play bishop d3. The way black plays it according, based on whether queen d2, king h7 played, bishop d3 should be treated differently. If white plays bishop d3 right away, then we go knight d7, and here comes interesting concept. We want to play knight e5. Now, white cannot play knight e2. So we could play knight d7, but that's not the best move. So what I should have said, that knight d7 and knight e5 is the main idea, but if we go knight e7, white plays knight f3, and white achieves what they wanted to do. They're going to castle next, and they're going to have some advantage. The move we should play in this position is knight to h5. Now you see we are interfering with white's plan. For example, if white goes knight f3, and how do we interfere? How can we stop castling? Here we go knight to g3, and black has huge advantage. Knight g3 attacking rook. Obviously white doesn't want to take this knight, because after rook takes c3, they lose very important minor piece, which allow black's domination on dark squares. And castling in this position is illegal. So if the rook moves, then after knight f5, attacking this bishop, white's position is simply bad, very bad. So after knight h5, white should go knight e2. Now they still prevent knight g3 and knight f4, and they're preparing to castle. Now we go knight d7. Now, again, we are interfering with white's castling. White can castle, of course, here, but after knight e5, we're going to take this bishop on d3, because bishop cannot retreat on a6, f1 diagonal, and we're going to take this bishop next move and then develop our bishop to f5. We're going to have fine game. So the white can stop that by playing g4, knight f6, and knight g3. Now you see that on knight e5 they will go bishop e2, and they seem to be okay. So what we do here, we do play knight e5, and on bishop e2, now what white wants to do to play queen d2 and castle long. Black's position may very quickly become very, very dangerous. What I would recommend here, this is the position where black seems to have difficulties in finding plan, but in reality they have an advantage. Well, if you can include a6 and a4 moves, because on a6, a4 is a standard reaction to stop b5, and that's not really necessary to include. This is possibility. You could have played this in like 3-4 moves ago, but if you have this exact position, the move is knight h7. It's a lot stronger move than it may seem. It's very, very powerful move. Not too often you can see quite move like this being so powerful. Let's see why this move is powerful. Here's why. If white follows this plan, queen d2, then after knight g5, and white castles, then we play knight g5 to f3. And you see that whole black's knights totally control hold center. After queen c2, you may go for a6 followed by b5, and you shouldn't worry about losing a pawn on a queen side, because the queen side attack will be unbearable for white. So, and maybe even in the future go knight d4, bishop takes d4, cd, and you will see that this dark square bishop on g7 is going to be a killer. So white cannot allow black knight's arrival on f3. After knight h7, nevertheless, black wants to go knight g5. Now, if white castles here, this is a bit dangerous, because after queen h4, we're attacking h3 square, and on king g2, maybe even f5, you see on g takes f, maybe we play knight takes c4. White's position is simply collapsing here. So what white may try is, after knight h7, to prevent any idea black may have here by playing h4. Now they played h4 and they stopped knight g5. But here we go back. Now we're attacking g4 pawn, and white has serious problems. If they go g5, then we may go knight g4. Now it becomes really dangerous for white. Now if bishop goes to d2, then we have knight d3 check. If bishop takes to g4, then knight is going to take on g4, and white is absolutely lost. So this indicates that after knight h7, white does not have satisfactory continuation, and black has great position. Now, let's go back few moves and see what if white does everything, including queen d2 and king h7 moves, just the way we mentioned. Okay, here is we're going to get to that position in a moment. But after playing d4, knight f6, c4, g6, knight c3, bishop g7, e4, d6, bishop e2, castle, bishop g5, h6, bishop e3, c5, d5, e6. Well, this is the first moment where white has a chance to play queen d2 and attack h6 pawn. Now king h7, now they go h3, they prepare to play bishop d3, we take on d5, they take on d5, we go rook e8, and white goes bishop d3. Now this is the same position we looked just a few moments ago, but rook was on f8, no, king was on g8, and queen was on d2, and we covered it. Now, if those moves are played, we have completely different plan. And here is the plan we have. So if queen d2 is played, and we went king h7, and now white plays h3, the move, which is very, very strong move in this position, is b5. Only because white's queen is standing on d2. Now, why is it important to play b5 here? Now, white has some problems that's not easy to solve. Well, they have to take the pawn on b5, otherwise we're going to push b4 and play knight to e4. They have two ways to capture b5 pawn. If knight takes b5, that gives black very, very powerful attack. After knight e4, now you see why it's important for black to have white's queen on d2. And after queen c2, here, I don't even know, black has so many good continuations, and one of them is simple knight g3. This creates serious problems for white. White doesn't want to put rook on h2. Then we can go bishop f5. Later on, we're going to take on e2, and we have tremendous initiative. So After knight to e4, black has tremendous position. So what happens c takes b? And here comes unusual again way to play this position. When you see b5 sacrifice for black in King's Indian, you can see it in many different variations. Normally it's always followed by a6. And Benko Gambit kind of sacrifice. Well, that's not why we played b5. b5, white takes, black simply plays knight to d7. And what is it, what knight d7 has to do with b5 move? Now we're going to find out. After knight to f3, black plays knight b6. And you see that white does not have any way to defend the d5 pawn. After castle and bishop b7, we're going to capture the pawn on d5, and we're going to have very strong central presence in it. Well, on the a4, knight takes d5. And it's easy to tell that all black's pieces concentrated in its center, and they have significant advantage. So that's the way to play against Averbach variation, and that's all you should know if you are King's Indian player and anyone plays Averbach variation against you. So now let's cover next variation. There are number of positions, number of variations white can play, as I mentioned. That's the only thing that black has to be prepared against all of them. d4, knight f6, c4, g6, knight c3, bishop g7, knight f3. We go d6 and g3. This is the fianchetto variation. What I would, after castle and bishop g2, there are many continuations for white. Again, it's a matter of taste. And what I can tell you here, not the best or worst continuation. The most popular is knight c6 and a6. But the one I would recommend will be c6, that one I strongly recommend, and I wouldn't be recommending it if I wasn't playing it myself. c6, castle, and queen to a5. Now, let's see what are the ideas of move queen to a5. First of all, if white does not play h3, which is probably the main move in this position, then we may try to play queen h5 followed by bishop h3. And if white plays h3, and that's what we're going to start, there are two main moves. One of them is h3, and the other one is e4. We're going to cover them both. So, on move h3, we play bishop to e6, attacking the c4 pawn. And white has several ways to defend this pawn. There is knight d2 move, there is queen d3 move, and there is d5, which is the main move. Now, let's look at them in any random order. So, for instance, knight d2. This move was played against me. Then we go queen a6, attack the c4 pawn again. White probably will play b3, and then we go d5. We are attacking the c4 pawn again, and white has choices to play c takes d, which was played against me once after knight takes d5. There are no problems for white at all. White has easy equality. For instance, if knight takes to d5, bishop takes to d5, exchange the light square bishop, since e4 is not good because bishop takes d4, simply wins a pawn. And if white plays e3 or bishop b2, black exchanges bishops on g2, goes knight d7, and they have very comfortable position. So the move was played against me by GM Zsuzsa Polgar was c5 once, but that does not create any problems for black because they're going to play knight to d7, then b6 probably just to break white's center, or maybe trying bishop f5 and e5. What black has good position. So knight d2 is not really a dangerous move here for black. Queen d3. This is one of the popular moves, was played against me also by very well-known Anatoly Karpov. It was in the match, we played mini match years ago, and I went queen a6, b3. It was easy equality for black. d5, knight to e5, knight to d7, c takes d, queen takes d3, knight takes to d3, knight takes to d5, and in this position black is equal. What happened in that game is bishop b2. Black cannot play bishop takes d4 because they lose after knight takes d5. But what happened in my game, we're going to run quickly. Knight takes c3, bishop takes c3, and I went rook f to d8. Idea of rook f to d8 to face knight f4, to play after knight f4, knight to f8. You see, we don't have good square to retreat the bishop, but knight f8 is very good move, because if black takes this bishop, then after knight takes e6, black increases pressure on d4 pawn. What happened in the game ended in a draw in this position after rook f to d1, a5, knight f4, knight f8, rook a to c1, a4, knight takes e6, knight takes e6, d5. Game quickly equalized. Bishop takes c3, position equalized. Rook takes c3, knight c7, rook d3. And after cd, bishop takes d5. There are multiple exchanges. Black took on b3, and after rook a6, rook d7, and rook e6, game ended shortly in a draw. Now this is easy equality. Now when you played it, if you achieved equality for black in whatever variation, that means your opening was successful. Now let's go back to the position of where white played queen d3. So remember this, against move queen d3, you have to play very accurately. In fact, if you play that position in some different move order, and if you mess up in the opening, you're going to be in danger of having passive position for the rest of the game. So here, after g3 castle, bishop g2, c6, castle, queen a5, h3, bishop e6, and there is one move left to cover, which we're going to cover now. It's a d5 move. C takes d, and now obviously white cannot recapture because they're going to lose a pawn on d5. Knight d4 is the main move. Well, it's interesting enough to say, and I was I have played this move before several times, and I think after d takes c, black is at least okay. That's exchange sacrifice. Bishop takes b7, knight to d7. Now bishop takes a8, rook takes a8, knight takes e6, pawn takes e6. Now black is exchanged down, and in my opinion, they have very good position. There were several games played with it. I remember my student Eugene Perlstein playing against a very strong grandmaster. He came very close to winning the game, and only because he made a couple of big mistakes, he drew. In this position, white has an exchange, extra exchange, but black has very strong center and a pawn for exchange. So white's material advantage is minimal. Black has full positional compensation. Now, there are two ways to play for black. Again, so in this position, after move knight d4, as I mentioned already, you can play d takes c and sacrifice this exchange, or you can play bishop to d7, and after c takes d, rook to c8. Now, why rook to c8? Because in case you've been kicked by knight b3, you can go queen to d8, and then you may play bishop e8, knight d7, knight b6. It's also very playable and maybe even a good position for black, and I played that too. I have very difficult time choosing one of those variations, whether to sacrifice exchange or not, but I think they are both very much acceptable for black. Now this will cover the h3 move after queen a5, but the main, well, actually no, the main move may be the h3, but e4 also popular. Then I would say you should play bishop to g4. There is an e5 old move, but we are not going to discuss this. That's not my recommendation. My recommendation is bishop to g4, h3, bishop takes f3, and now the best way to recapture bishop on f3 is by the bishop. Taking with the queen is not nearly as good, because after knight f2 d7, white is going to have to play bishop e3. We go c5, and if white goes d5, unexpectedly, black has big advantage by playing knight e5, attacking queen and the c4 pawn, and after queen e2 and queen b4, white loses a pawn, because c4 pawn cannot be protected now. So white cannot play this way. And let's see what else can they do after bishop e3, c5, and if they play something like rook d1, then we can go knight to c6, and again, black has an advantage, because some move like d takes c, black can play bishop takes c3, pawn takes c3, and knight takes c5. It's okay to give dark square bishop, because now all white pawns are targets. a2 is hanging, c3 is hanging, and c4 pawn is weak, and black's knight have knight outposts in the center. So playing queen takes f3 is not a good idea. And we're going back to the position. So on bishop takes f3, bishop takes f3 is the best move. But now we can simply go knight to d7, followed by e5, and again we don't have light square bishop, followed by e5, and you cannot play King's Indian defense with black if you don't know main ideas and main strategical points of it. If you do, you know you have a reasonably good position here. You may go e5, or you may go even c5. In both cases, you're doing just fine. If white closes the center after c5, you may go for a6 and b5, and you have no problems at all here. So this is very acceptable and equal position for black, at least, I would say. So this is okay to play for black. Now, we just covered, after queen a4, e4 move, and we covered the h3 move. And some move like bishop d2, you can simply go queen h5, and if white goes e4, then you may even pin with bishop g4, and black may be having an advantage here because they're going to go knight d7 and then trying to disturb d4 pawn. Now, if white pushes or takes on c5, then after knight e5, they may lose heavy material. So these positions are okay. Bishop d2 is not a good move. And queen h5 and bishop g4, or queen h5, bishop h3 are ideas. And e4 and the h3 move, they're both interfering with queen h5 ideas. And we already went through them and to see what you should play against those. This is brief but sufficient coverage of the fianchetto variation. Now, there are some other variations. Some other variations such as Zemish. Zemish for many, many years was the most the most popular way to play for white against the King's Indian. Now, what can I recommend you here? I can recommend you two different systems. On a castle, bishop e3 and c5. This is a pawn sacrifice. Was, by the way, with a great pride, I can say it was invented by me, I don't know, maybe like 25 years ago or even longer. Maybe like even more, but 28 years ago. This is a pawn sacrifice that was played by me against Grandmaster Lev Polugaevsky many years ago. But later on, it was played by many other grandmasters, and it was mixed results. There was a lot of theory about it. Now, I would recommend you this, to play c5. Now, if you want to play c5, you should do certain research on your own. You should go through various different publications. You have to pull up several dozens of games and see how it went. This is interesting and very active way to play for black. However, what I want to cover on this in this discussion is not the c5 variation, but knight to d7 variation. Now, let's see what I mean by that. Knight d7, queen d2, and now c5. Now c5, obviously, it's not a pawn sacrifice. If white goes d5, then we're going to go a6, trying for b5, and after a4, probably rook e8, and then e6. We are doing okay here. But the main continuation here after c5 is knight to e2. Black does not want to play c takes d and knight takes d4 because we get bad variety of the Maróczy bind in accelerated dragon. With knight on d7, that's not good way to play against Maróczy bind. So we are not taking on d4. We're going queen a5 or a6. It's almost the same thing. Queen a5, castles long, and now a6. Now the main move here, king b1, and black goes b5. Now this is an interesting position. What black wants to do here is start quickly queenside attack, and obviously white may want to have the kingside attack. But now after b5, h4 and g4 is not recommended because black is first. Black is ahead in attack. After h4, b takes c, and rook to b8, they open the file first. But white has moved knight to d5, and it's typical shot for this types of positions where knight d5 move, and now you know you cannot take the queen because white has in between shot knight takes e7 check followed by rook takes d2, which leaves black two choices: to play queen d8 protecting the e7 pawn, or the second choice, knight takes d5. This is an interesting queen sacrifice that was performed many years ago by Mikhail Tal. Queen takes a5. Well, if white does not play queen takes a5, they have another choice to play c takes d. But then black has no problems. Even if they exchange the queens, they are doing very fine. They can play even c4, and they will be doing fine. So the principal continuations is queen takes a5 and knight takes e3. Now what do we have? We have two minor pieces for the queen. Under no circumstances this is enough material compensation. But black has a lot of positional compensation. For example, rook is hanging now, for instance. If rook goes to c1, then black plays knight takes c4. Now you see, next move they want to play cd. So they're going to have two pawns and two minor pieces with continuing attack on a queen side, and white may very soon be in trouble. Player with white that played against Grandmaster Tal was a Grandmaster too himself. So he played rook takes c4, b takes c, and now we see black does not have direct attack on white's king. But on the other hand, you should notice that white's advantage, material advantage, is not that great. All white has is a minimal material advantage. Black has rook, bishop, and a pawn for the queen. So white's material advantage is not that great, and black has very powerful bishop on g7, open b file. Well, rook may go to b8, and I really like here black's chances. I think black is simply better here. So after knight takes c4, on the other hand, if white plays something like queen e1, then c takes d, and if white goes knight f4, I don't know, we may go knight to c5, and you see black's pieces crawling towards white's king. Maybe not knight c5, but knight to b6, protecting the knight on c4. Since move like b3 may be very dangerous, we may have knight a3 check, or push the pawn, opening the... Well, we cannot cover it completely, what can happen after it, but that's where comes the intuition that black should have a good game. On any move like b3, on top of everything, we also have knight e3 move, which is good outpost for knight. So this is interesting and good position for black. So those are the one continuation that I recommended you against Zemish is the pawn sacrifice with c5, and the other is knight d7 and c5 variation. Also, you have to choose, well, I have to tell you the way you have to choose it is according to your style. And if you play c5 variation with a pawn sacrifice, you have to back up your style with a lot of knowledge of this variation. So this covers three most important parts of most important continuations for white of King's Indian. So we covered fianchetto variation, Zemisch, classical, actually 4, classical and Averbach. There are some minor and the basic development variations for white, for example, in King's Indian. For example, if you go d4, knight f6, knight f3, g6, white may play something like bishop f4, bishop g7, e3. Something similar to London system, or play some passive e3 and c3 continuations. Well, all I can tell you here is what black should do, just castle, and if black, there is a simple setup to go b6, bishop to b7, rook to e8, and e5. You will always have good position. We cannot go through variation because there is no theory on it. There is no theory. You have to know the plan. How you set up your pieces. You play double fianchetto and prepare for e5. This is okay way to play against those positions. White will always be very solid, so will be black. But you don't experience any pressure in the opening the way you can experience in some other openings. So that's absolutely no danger. And it may also go for variations like when white plays d4 and c4, d4, knight f6, c4, g6, knight c3, bishop g7, knight f3 castles. And for example, they play something like e3. You know right away that you will never experience here opening problems. You go d6, you go knight d7, you go e5, and that's the end of the opening knowledge you should have. The rest of it, how you play chess, and we don't discuss on this series how to play chess. I'm just introducing you to the trying to get for you reasonably good position in the opening. So that will cover it. There is your answer. You have no problems here. Now let's go back and do a little summary. That's basically all you need to know in King's Indian. I covered the variations to play against that white chooses, variations that where white tries to get opening advantage. There are so many variations, so many ways white can equalize in the opening. They can start with the first move a3 and they're going to be okay. They can start with the first move c3. So we cannot give you complete answers on every possible move. So I just covered the vital variations, vital ideas, how to play against popular and most commonly used variations in King's Indian. And if you use them, you will be okay. But now let's discuss what will happen if they play King's Indian against us and we are white. I play d4 very frequently, and there is a system that I specifically like against King's Indian. The system I'm talking about is d4, knight f6, c4, g6, knight c3, bishop g7, knight f3. This system I covered in some of my previous tapes on the opening repertoire for white. Now black castles, white plays bishop f4, d6, and e3. Now the idea of this opening, the idea of this system is to develop quickly castle on king side and start queen side attack. If black plays standard knight d7, let's first cover the black's attempt to get the dark square bishop. Remember, this dark square bishop in King's Indian most of the time is the most important minor piece. On knight h5, we would go bishop g5. It's very difficult for black to get the dark square bishop. h6, bishop h4. And if black plays g5, attempting to get a white's dark square bishop on bishop g3, knight takes g3, then white plays knight d2 in this position, attacking the knight on h5. Now, obviously, taking this bishop is very dangerous because black's king's position is not safe. So, otherwise, knight has to go back to f6. And then we go bishop g3. So, black is weakened their king side position for no reason. They never got the dark square bishop. So, the move, knight d7, well, we should go h3 to prepare escape for future, for bishop on h2. If black goes rook e8, bishop e2, they cannot play e5. That's very important. You should know that. Because then white plays d takes e, and knight takes e5. Black simply lost a pawn. Because after knight takes e5, we play queen takes d8. And after rook takes d8, bishop takes e5, black is simply pawned down for absolutely no compensation. So black cannot go e5 yet. So in order to prepare e5, they have to go b6 and bishop b7. So if they go b6, we castle. And if they go bishop to b7, now they are ready to go e5. And that's where I would like to go d5. Now, after e5, you have two ways to play. You may play bishop g5, followed by e4. And you see bishop on b7 is not really best placed piece. On the other hand, you can also play d takes e. And this is maybe equal position, but it's different. If you like this position, position is equal. If you like to play, you can play so too. So the most common way to play for average player, average to a masters even, play this position, and they, 1, 2, 3, 4 moves, 5 moves for white, black castles, we go e3, and now black goes knight d7, we go h3, and black plays queen e8. This is the most common way to play. We play bishop e2, and after e5, we simply go bishop h2. Now black goes queen e7, and we castle. This position looks simple, but this position is, in reality, is a very difficult position for black. Black has serious problem with a counterplay. What is white's plan? White's plan is to go rook c1 or rook b1, then b4 and c5. White wants to open position in its center where the bishop on h2 will be very, very dangerous piece. And what they do frequently with black, they play e4. Then we go knight d2, and you see this position is extremely difficult for black. They are in a really bad shape now. Move like c6, what we want to do, we want to go b4 and c5. Move c6, we will be met by b4, and after rook e8, we go c5. Now you see, after d takes c and b takes c, you see that black is in big, big trouble. The reason we are because knight c4, knight d6 is coming, bishop d6 is coming. So the natural reaction after c5 will be d5. but that's also very bad. Now, we know white has to play on queen side and black has to play on king side, but black is miles and miles behind. Let's see why. We go b5. No, black wants to play knight f8, probably open some pieces. Then we're going to go b takes c, queen a4. We already started initial attack on a vital c6 square. If black may defend it with bishop d3, and now white can bring a lot of pieces on queen side and continuing attack. Rook b1, idea is rook b7. You see, black can never play rook b8 because of the bishop on h2. And white's next move expected to be rook b7. The way white wants to continue, knight b3, knight a5, and rook b1, it's very, very quick. Black does not have a counterplay on the king side. And you'll see there is a queen here to attack. Bishop from h2 is very important, attacking whole queen side. And b-file entirely owned by white. Black is simply lost here. This is lost position. It's so easy to fall in this position. And I saw many times that I played this, and I play reasonably strong players, and they would fall. When they realize they have very bad position, it's already too late. And that happened to me countless times. And this is very difficult for black to handle. Of course, the normal way for black to play again, that does not mean white gets an advantage in this variation of King's Indian, not at all. What I'm saying, this is easy to learn system for white and easy to play system. Knight f3, castle, bishop f4, d6, e3. There are ways to play for black. For example, knight f2, d7 to play e5 next move. We go h3, e5, and bishop h2. And after queen e7, bishop e2. This is okay. Black can go f5, we can castle. If black goes e4, which is a bad move, we know knight d2 for the same idea. We go b4 and c5. So best for black to do to maintain their pawn on e5. But then we have the same plan. So we know what our plan is. We know what we want to do. We know how our middle game is going to develop. So you having no problems. You have your plan design, and it's easy to play system for white. That's the main idea to play this variation against King's Indian. Four-pawn attack in King's Indian was very popular a number of years ago. Actually, quite a number of years ago, maybe like 20 years ago. And it was, black had kind of difficulties to handle it, but nowadays it becomes less and less popular. It's not the type of variation I would recommend for you to play for white. And if you really want to play it for white, then you are on your own, and there is plenty of available material. However, if you are playing black, here is what I can recommend you. d4, knight f6, c4, g6, knight c3, bishop g7, e4, d6, f4, castle, knight f3, and c5. Now, this is the key position of a four-pawn attack. White basically has here two moves. One of them is d takes c, and the other one is d5. Well, let's look at those moves in any random order. So let's go with d5. What I would recommend here to play for black is to e6, and after bishop e2, e takes d, c takes d, or e takes d. Two moves that white has here. Let's look at them both. On c takes d, the move I would recommend bishop g4, and when white castles, bishop takes f3, bishop takes f3, and knight to d7. See, the important thing is white has this center, strong center, and you must make sure that the center is not going to move right on you. So you stop the e5, and if it's necessary, you're going to play rook e8 to stop from further movement of it, and prepare the counterplay on a queen side. Those basics, if you know this is enough for you to get comfortable position in this variation of 4-pawn attack. Now let's go with the other variation, which is e takes d and e takes d. Actually, we have the position here. And in this position, black goes bishop to f5. We want to make sure we have the right number of moves on both sides. So black goes c5, white goes d5, e6, bishop e2, e takes d, e takes d. Again, bishop f5. Now let's see what can happen here. White castles, black goes rook e8. Actually, you can play rook e8 first and bishop f5 later. And here, black is trying to go knight e4 and get very good position. Knight takes e4, bishop takes e4. This position is very good for black. White may try knight h4. And I would say knight h4 that was recommended at the time when the opening was very popular for white. It is a losing move. Why is it losing? Because knight takes d5. And knight takes d5 was considered as a bad move because white simply plays knight takes d5, and after queen takes h4, knight to c7, forking two rooks. We're going to get back to it in a moment. But for now, we see what happens on knight takes f5. We simply play knight takes c3, gf, b takes c, followed by queen f6, and black has extra pawn in great position. So now we're going back to the knight takes d5 move. Then black plays queen takes h4 and knight c7. Here, black plays knight c6, and white has a choice of the rooks, which rook to take. Obviously, big majority of the players will play knight takes rook on a8 because they would want black rook to go to a8 and not to capture the e rook when black rook is going to end up on e8. However, taking knight rook on a8 is an instant loser because black plays bishop d4 check, and after king h1, bishop to f2, and white has no defense. They are totally lost. The threat is bishop g3, threatening mate, h3, bishop takes h3. There is absolutely no defense for white. So the best response for white is to take the e8 rook. Now, however, bishop d4 move is not as good. Well, bishop d4 move is okay, but after king h1, bishop f2 move is not as good because white has bishop g4. And after bishop takes g4, queen takes g4, we see that black is losing because on queen takes g4 there is knight f6 check. So based on this variation, we can tell that it's okay to give check king h1 and rook takes e8. Now let's assess this position. Black has knight and a pawn for the rook, but none of the white pieces can move. Black is totally dominating the board. g3, queen h3, and threat of bishop e4 possibly, or knight b4 is absolutely devastating. Here, black wants to go knight b4 and knight c2. This is very strong threat. And if white plays a3, well, I think we have the winning combination here. Rook takes e2, queen takes e2, and bishop e4 check. You see, if queen takes e4, black's rook is hanging on f1 with a checkmate. This position is bad for white. So again, in a critical position where black plays c5, this is in the opening position, black just played c5, so we just looked at d5 move. And the another move I would like to look at is d takes c. Then black plays queen a5, bishop d3. You see the knight takes e4 is a threat. Bishop d3, queen takes c5, queen to e2, knight c6, and bishop e3. Black goes queen a5, and this position is better for black because based on this variation, castling knight g4, and this position was wrongly assessed in theory before because bishop d2 and queen b6, king h1, they said black cannot play queen takes b2 because they lose the queen. Yes, they lose the queen, but they win the game. So there are two moves white has, rook b1, rook ab1, and rook fb1. Rook fb1 is out of question because queen a3, knight b5, queen takes d3, winning the game. On queen takes d3, knight f2 check. So the move is rook a to b1. Queen a3, knight b5, queen takes a2. And now e5 move wins the queen because queen is trapped. But then we simply play d takes e, and after rook a1, queen takes a1. Rook takes a1, you go e4, and you have absolutely winning position. White has only two moves. They have to stop e takes d followed by knight f2 check, so they can only go rook a3 or rook f1. Suppose they go rook f1, we play e takes d, queen takes d3. Let's assess the position. Black has rook, bishop, and two pawns for the queen. This is absolutely sufficient compensation materially. Positionally, they have very active pieces and enormously strong a pawn, which can cause a lot of problems for white. For instance, if black goes a5 followed by a4, a3, white is going to have very hard time stopping it and controlling it. So this is obviously very good position for black. Now in the variation where black, in the position where black castled, they could have stopped knight g4, and let's see what would have happened then. In this position, we just had, if black castles, we go knight g4, and that's how we got there. But if they go h3 to stop knight g4 and castle after that, does it look good for white? No, it's not. Because black simply plays knight h5, threatening knight g3, and if somehow black protects it, also threatening bishop h6. So this creates a lot of problems for white, and this is not acceptable for white at all. So this is not a good position. Also, queen f2 is not possible because then bishop takes c3, and black simply wins. So if h3 is not good, and after castle knight g4, bishop d2, queen b6 leads to the variation we just discussed, is also very good for black, then whole variation is good. If you know, actually I don't know anymore against 4 pawns attack, and I like it, the position. I like the position I was getting throughout the years. And if you know just as much and have the same approach, you're going to have good positions. You will do well. That will be our complete cover of the King's Indian defense.